They sealed this room without ceremony. No prayer, no record, just a door closed and never open again. If you had walked past that wing of the plantation in the late 1830s, you would not have noticed anything unusual. The walls looked the same. The windows were bricked over with care, not haste. The plaster was smooth, repainted, blended into the rest of the house. Even the floorboard were replaced, so no hollow sound would betray what lay behind them. What they never wrote down is that the decision to seal the room was not made in daylight. It happened at night, after the last lamp was extinguished, after the overseer stopped speaking mid-sentence. Those who were present later disagreed on almost every detail. How many people were in the room? Who suggested sealing it? Who gave the order? Who held the key before it vanished? But they all agreed on one thing. Nothing inside that room was supposed to be remembered. For decades, the plantation functioned as if that space did not exist. Generations of owners slept beneath it. Children played in the corridors outside it. Guests leaned against the very wall that hid it, laughing, drinking, unaware that the house had been rearranged around a silence. No official record explains why. The account books continued. Crop yields were recorded. Births and deaths were listed with cold precision. Names of enslaved people appeared and disappeared in the margins, reduced to numbers, initials, or scratches of ink. But one architectural fact was never explained: a missing room. If you measure the house from the outside, it was obvious. The east wing was longer than it should have been. There was empty volume where no chamber, storage space, or stairwell existed on paper. Surveyors noticed it years later. They mentioned it casually. An anomaly, an oversight. The plantation owners dismissed it with smiles that did not reach their eyes. And enslaved people never mentioned it at all. Those who knew never spoke again. By the early 19th century, silence had become policy, not just about the room, but about certain nights, certain sounds, certain individuals who vanished without punishment, sale, or burial. The plantation had rules, like all plantations. Written rules, spoken rules, unspoken ones. And then there were the rules that existed only in memory. Children were told not to play near the eastern wall, not because it was dangerous, because it was unlucky. Servants were instructed never to dust a particular section of the hallway, not because it was sacred, because it was already clean. Even the dogs refused to sleep there. What they never wrote down was that the room was sealed after something went wrong that could not be punished. Punishment was easy. Whips, chains, sales, public examples. This was different. This was something that unsettled the people who believed themselves untouchable. For nearly 40 years, the room remained sealed. Then the plantation collapsed. Not dramatically, not in flames. It did not fall during a revolt or a war. It withered slowly, as if avoiding attention. Crops failed without clear reason. Skilled laborers died too young. Overseers quit without explanation. Buyers stopped coming. By the time the property changed hands in the late 1870s, slavery was officially over, but the silence remained intact. The new owner was not born into the house. He had no inherited fear of its corridors. He walked with curiosity instead of reverence. He noticed the measurements. He noticed the imbalance. And he asked the wrong question. What's behind that wall? No one answered him. The workers avoided his eyes. The older hands left within weeks. One simply walked away at dawn and never returned. Still, the question lingered. What they never wrote down is that when the decision was finally made to open the sealed room, no one volunteered to be present. The door had to be rebuilt from scratch because the original hinges had been removed. Not rusted, removed, carefully, as if someone wanted to make sure it could never swing open again. When the wall finally gave way, it did not reveal darkness. It revealed order. And that was the first thing that terrified them. The room was not chaotic. It was not violent. It was arranged. Dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed for decades. Yet beneath it was a precision that felt intentional. Objects were aligned. Marks on the floor followed patterns, not scratches. The air smelled old, but not rotten. Preserved, sealed in time. No official record explains why there were no chains. That absence was noted immediately. It unsettled those who expected them. The room did not look like a punishment cell. It did not resemble any known holding space. There were no bars on the windows, because there were no windows at all. Only walls, smooth, closed. Along one side of the room stood a narrow table, its surface darkened by age. On it lay paper. Not scraps, not ledgers. Individual sheets, stacked carefully, edges aligned. Ink had bled through some of them. Others were blank, except for symbols no one could immediately interpret. What they never wrote down is that the handwriting on those pages did not match the plantation owner's hand, nor the overseer's, nor any known clerk. It was practiced, steady and consistent across years. Dates were missing. Names were incomplete. Some entries used only initials. Others used symbols in place of letters, as if the writer did not want language itself to betray them. In the center of the room, the floor was worn smooth, not by dragging, but by standing, repeatedly, in the same spot, facing the same wall. There were faint outlines where candles had once burned. Many candles. Melted wax pooled in shallow depressions that had been deliberately carved into the floorboards to catch it. Someone had planned for this room to be used often, but not by force. No official record explains why the plantation's most literate enslaved workers all disappeared from the documents within a 5-year period. Not sold, not punished, not freed, they simply stop appearing. What they never wrote down is that some of the symbols on the papers matched markings later found carved into tools, door frames, and trees across the property. Small, easy to miss, repeated, a language without sound. Those who discovered the room argued about its purpose: a secret office, a hidden chapel, a place of forbidden meetings. But none of those explanations survived long, because behind the table, fixed to the wall, was a board covered in marks that were not writing. They were corrections, lines scratched out, symbols overwritten, patterns revised again and again, as if someone had been trying to perfect something that refused to remain stable. And beneath those marks were names. Real names, not the names given in account books, not the names assigned by owners. Names that did not appear anywhere else on the plantation. African names, carried across water, meant to be forgotten. Those who knew never spoke again, but the walls spoke for them. There were no prayers written there, no appeals, no pleas, only records, measurements of time without clocks, counts of people without numbers, notes about nights when it worked and nights when it failed. No official record explains what it was, but one thing became clear. The room had not been sealed to hide a crime. It had been sealed to stop something that was still happening. Among the papers was one sheet set apart from the rest, thicker, folded many times. The ink was darker, as if pressed harder into the fibers. It was not written in symbols. It was written in plain language. And it ended with a sentence that changed the meaning of everything they thought they understood about the plantation. We cannot allow them to continue. No subject, no explanation, just fear. The handwriting on that page did match someone known, the plantation owner. And below it, another line, written later, shakier, almost unwilling. We no longer know how to stop it. The discovery of the room did not bring closure. It brought hesitation. The new owner ordered the papers removed, cataloged, studied. But the people tasked with that work began to delay. They claimed illness, fatigue, confusion. Some refused outright, offering no reason beyond a tightness in their chest when they stood inside. One man collapsed without warning, not from injury, from panic. What they never wrote down is that the room produced a reaction that had nothing to do with superstition and everything to do with recognition. As the papers were examined, patterns emerged, not in content, but in timing. Certain entries corresponded to nights when no work was recorded the next day. Others matched sudden changes in labor assignments. Some aligned with deaths that were officially attributed to weakness or fever, but the language on the pages did not describe suffering. It described observation, as if the writer or writers were watching something unfold and trying to understand it. One repeated phrase appeared across decades, slightly altered each time. They remember together. No official record explains what that means. But beneath the floorboards, something else was found. A hollow space, too small to stand in, too deliberate to be accidental. Inside were objects wrapped in cloth. Carefully, respectfully, not tools, not weapons, personal items. Braided hair, beads worn smooth by fingers, fragments of wood carved with symbols that matched the walls. These were not hidden in fear. They were stored, preserved like evidence. Those who knew never spoke again, but the placement of those objects suggested something the plantation's structure had tried to prevent. Community, not the kind written about later. Not resistance through open rebellion. This was quieter, more dangerous. Shared memory. The room was not a place of punishment. It was a place of gathering. Not all at once, not loudly, but deliberately. The enslaved people who disappeared from the records had not vanished. They had been reassigned, removed from the visible machinery of the plantation, and placed into a role that no ledger could track. They were listeners, recorders, keepers of something that could not be allowed to spread. What they never wrote down is that the plantation owner did not seal the room because he discovered rebellion. He sealed it because he realized control was no longer complete. The writings show a shift over time. Early entries are confident, curious, almost dismissive. Later ones are tense, fragmented. The symbols become denser, the corrections more frantic. At some point, the language changes entirely. The writer stops describing what the enslaved people are doing and starts describing what the house itself is doing. Sounds, vibrations, changes in temperature without cause. There's an entry that mentions a wall listening, another that notes that after certain gatherings, the plantation seemed to refuse orders. Tools broke, animals panicked, crops failed in specific areas, not randomly but selectively. No official record explains how a building could behave like that, but the fear is undeniable. The final entries are brief. They know we know. They no longer need the room. If we destroy the space, the memory may follow. And then silence. The room was sealed shortly after, not to imprison what was inside, but to contain what had already escaped. When the new owner read these final lines, he stopped the work. The room was closed again, not bricked, not erased, just left. And for the first time since it was opened, the house felt quiet. Years passed. The plantation was abandoned. Nature reclaimed the fields. The house decayed unevenly, as if some parts were allowed to rot while others resisted it. The sealed room remained intact. What they never wrote down is that people who lived nearby began to tell stories again, not about whips or chains, but about voices that could be heard only when standing still, about dreams shared by multiple people who had never met, about names remembered by children who had never been taught them. Those who knew never spoke again, but something was speaking now, quietly. The room was never officially opened a second time, yet fragments of its contents surfaced in unexpected places. A symbol carved into a church pew miles away, a phrase repeated in a song with no known origin, objects buried where no one admitted placing them. The plantation house eventually collapsed. The eastern wing fell last. When it did, the sealed room was destroyed, not revealed, but crushed inward, as if the house itself had chosen not to expose it. No excavation followed, no investigation, only absence. Today, nothing marks the site. No plaque, no warning, no acknowledgement that the room ever existed. But what they never wrote down is that sealed spaces do not erase what happened inside them. They concentrated. The records are gone. The walls are dust. The names have scattered. Yet the structure remains, not in wood or stone, but in patterns of remembering that refuse to fade. Some knowledge does not need preservation. It survives through silence. And if you listen closely, not to what history proclaims, but to what it avoids, you can still sense it. A room that was sealed not to hide the past, but to stop it from continuing. And the unsettling truth is this: it did not stop. It simply learned to exist without walls,